Hey everybody, today we're doing something a little bit different today. We're not doing a success story necessarily. Instead, we're having something extra interesting for you today. We have with us Susan, who recently attended a diabetic conference, and she has a few grievances about it. I think it's going to be a very interesting story just to see what the experts are telling us about how to manage diabetes and how they're getting it all wrong. So Susan, take it. Yeah, Susan, take it away. What was this diabetic conference, and just tell us how it went for you.
You bet, Justin. Thanks. This was a conference, the dietary conference. It was an evening seminar, about 2.5 hours, and it was hosted by our local hospital, who has a specific office called the Center for Diabetes Management, and they actually have a very nice offsite, satellite office of the hospital that is this entire facility for diabetes management, which means it's staffed with CDEs and dietitians. And I think a lot of training goes on, pump training and CGM training and things like that. And obviously dietary training. And this evening was hosted by two CDEs and a chef who evidently is fairly well known. I didn't know her, but she's fairly well known in this area. She's trained at the Cordon Bleu and teaches and has her own business and has worked at the hospitals and has managed diabetic menu options for hospitals and clinics. And I mean, her resume was quite impressive. And so I kind of was feeling excited, thinking, this is good. She knows her stuff. Until the first screenshot went up on her PowerPoint presentation talking about macros. Now, Justin, you and I know that there are 3 macros: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Well, interestingly enough, her slide included some different macros.
What?
Who knew dairy was a macro? Didn't know that. Didn't know that dairy was a macro. Didn't
Oh
know
boy.
that fruits was a macro, and also did not know that grains were a macro. But I guess in that world, it is. So this evening was supposed to be healthy holidays, recipe makeovers, and how to manage our chronic disease through the next 3 months, the holidays. And it was disturbing. It was packed full of incorrect statements, in my opinion, and very misleading. And I left crushed, heartbroken, sad, and disgusted because I was there with about 45 other type 1 diabetics and their significant others, caregivers or spouses or children. And Justin, our future is doomed if we don't turn this tide quickly.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the first step is admitting something is wrong and showing what's wrong, and that's what we're here for today. We're going to rant our hearts out about this and put all this misinformation to light, so we know what we're up against at the very least.
Yeah.
So, um, I always take okay. At first, I thought, oh, this is going to be typical stuff, but you pop right in with something I've never heard of before. Macros. They use the word macros.
Uh-huh.
They used the word
Uh-huh.
macros, and they included dairy, fruit, and bread in
Grains.
the
Mm-hmm.
macros. Not in the food groups, but the macros.
Yep.
My gosh.
Yep.
Well, what other stuff? Other crazy things they talk about.
Well, the chef that was there, and she was a wonderfully personable lady. She was probably my age. She's obviously well versed in food and preparation and personality and engaging people about their diets. But one time in the 2.5 hours was the word carbohydrate mentioned. She was more interested in verifying that there were any nut allergies or dairy allergies. And what was funny is she called it lactose intolerant. Do we have any lactose intolerant people here? And a couple people raised their hand, and she was so worried about making sure that we left the sour cream garnish off of one of the dishes because the lactose intolerant person couldn't have it then. And I chuckled because I consider myself carbohydrate intolerant, yet she never asked how many of us carbohydrate intolerant people were there. One time And I literally was prepared to keep a tally sheet at one time until I started asking questions. And then carbohydrate came up. And when I asked her, because she made a beautiful hot quinoa salad with dates and cranberries and several nuts and feta cheese.
Great food for a bird.
Absolutely, absolutely. And shredded Brussels, there was Brussels sprouts in it. And it was drizzled with balsamic reduction and a date glaze dressing. And so as I sat there furiously entering the recipe into my Fitness Pal, she was making it, and I was trying to keep track of what all she was adding and making guesstimates, obviously. I was in the front row. But I figured that the little scoop that she was dishing out for samples was approximately 28 grams of carbohydrate. Now, that was a salad, and it was literally a little sample cup. And the other recipe she made was a squash soup that had pecans and pomegranates and low-fat milk and a flour thickener. Obviously not something I would eat. And I calculated that macro of the little quarter cup serving size to be about 25 grams of carbohydrate. And I could have been off. Those were just my guesstimates. But she never mentioned once. Now you have a room full of people. And I will admit that other than the children, I was probably the youngest type 1 in the audience. And there were several type 2s. And I'm not saying that as a judgment or anything. I'm just stating that's who the audience was.
Most diabetics are type 2, so that makes sense.
Yeah. And the participants of the evening were, of course, gobbling up the samples because they were beautiful. They were beautiful, and I guess they were delicious. I didn't have any. It was construed that I would say the others construed me as rude when I passed on the samples, and that was not looked upon favorably. But I said out loud, I said, that's just way too many carbs for me to eat for something like that. And so when it was all said and done, and she went through all of her makeover recipes, included low-fat milks, low-fat sour creams, low-fat cream cheese, fat-free cream cheese, things like that. That was her version of makeover. And it was simply there was no mention of artificial sweeteners or sweetener substitutes, sugar substitutes. There was no mention of that. It was mainly fat and grains.
I bet they mentioned fat a lot of times, huh?
Yes. And evidently we are going to live forever as long as we get, 25 grams of fiber a day and eat frozen bread. That's how you can.
Why frozen?
She spoke for several minutes that if you freeze your bread and then defrost it, it becomes refined starch and it's way better to eat for you. People in the audience were writing that down as fast as they could.
Oh my God.
Because I promise you, all over my town, there are loaves of bread in the freezer right now. And I said, that doesn't change the carb count. And she
also doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't. But she told all of the audience that for women, we should get 25 grams of fiber a day. And that's probably what I get in a typical meal and a half. She said men should have 35 grams of fiber. And I liked that she was encouraging fiber consumption, but other than that, it was low fat, fat-free. That was all butter. That was a big question. Butter versus the oils. It's olive oil versus coconut oil. Coconut oil. She doesn't like coconut oil.
She doesn't like coconut oil?
No. And avocado oil is expensive.
Does she like seed oils? Like soybean oil? Vegetable oil? Vegetable oil?
What was the one she liked? I can't remember what the one. She actually, and this stunned me because I thought this was a fairly common conception right now, is the canola oil. Yeah, canola oil. which I wouldn't touch. But walnut oil, I think, was one of them that she was really big on, but pretty much avocado oil. I'm sorry, olive oil. Olive oil.
She didn't like canola oil?
No, she likes canola oil.
Oh, of course she does. Yeah.
Yeah. So when this was all said and done, and I sat there and I smiled my little smile and sat there in the front row and took notes. I'm sure she thought I was taking other notes. But she did use amazing spices, and her food was beautiful. But nobody talked about the nutrition behind it, or the carbohydrates behind it, or the healthy fats that were omitted from it. I'm like, throw an avocado in there, or two, or some walnuts. I mean, take the pomegranate seeds out, take the date out of there. I mean, it was stunning that she was in a room full of people dependent on insulin to live, and she was adding these things to the recipes that she was making. And it was sad, because everybody was eating it up, both the information and the samples. And not one person asked, what's the carb count in this? And we had pumpers. We had a guy who was giving his shots. We had several people reaching for their pumps. And then about 30 minutes later, Dexcom started going off. And that's a true sign that carb counting does not work. And carbs are complicated. Carbs are complicated. And if she says that freezing bread is going to refine the starch and make it low glycemic, baloney. Glycemic indexes do not work for diabetics. I believe that, and I've said that for years. Others disagree with me, but this dietitian, trained in France, trained in the culinary institutes of all over the country, and working with diabetics and hospitals and healthcare providers, did not mention to a room full of diabetics the nutrition counts, the carb counts, or what the food she was giving us was going to do to our blood sugars. And I think that's criminal. I think it's malpractice, and I think it's criminal. And
so did they just guesstimate?
Oh, people were just swagging left and right. You could see it. You could see it. I mean, people just grabbing their pumps and just dialing up the units. It was, but let's face it, that's how so many on the standard American diet do. Like, oh, that looks like about 8 units, 9 units, whatever.
It's kind of what we're told to do.
That's what we're told to do. And carb counting does not work. First of all, if you're going to take the time to actually count it out, which most people don't, they just assume that a slice of bread is 18 grams of carbohydrate. Oh, please. We've all seen 35 to 12 and everything in between. There's just estimates. And it's scientific wild ass guessing. And that's exactly what swagging stands for. And that's what this room of diabetics was looking for, was information, and they were not getting it. And
well, they got information, but it's misinformation.
But they were craving good information, I believe, because when I went up and talked to the chef afterwards, very defensive, and I was trying to be very kind. I did not come at her with guns blazing. But I mentioned that she did not mention once the carbohydrate content. And she did not ask if anybody, needed to eat 50 grams of carbohydrates. She did not mention the ingredients that were obviously carb loaded. Dates. Oh my gosh. Let's just concentrate and intensify all the carbohydrates.
You're basically eating raisins at that point.
I know. And then let's drizzle balsamic reduction over the whole thing. So I asked my words with her, and she said, you don't need to avoid carbs. I said, I'm carbohydrate intolerant. And she goes, no, you're not. And I said, if I eat carbohydrate, I need something else to counter the effects of those carbohydrates, correct? And she said, well, of course, you have insulin. And I said, that makes me intolerant. I cannot do it on my own. I need an X-force to metabolize those carbohydrates. She did not agree with me. And which is fine. Lots of people don't agree with me. You and I are used to that. But lots of people were listening. And I said, I value my daily averages, I value my blood sugar, and I value my A1C. And I'm sorry, a quinoa salad is not going to justify jeopardizing any of those numbers. So she asked me, she said, what's your A1C? And I told her, and she said, you're diabetic? And I said, yes, I am, for 35 and a half years. And she said, you must have a lot of lows. And I think that's so sad that in today, I mean, how long have CGMs been popular? Seriously, the last half a decade, way more popular. They've been around for more than that, obviously. But I mean, ramping up big time. And that's automatically this dietitian's answer is, you must be having a lot of lows.
Yeah, not a congrats, not a hey,
Nope.
that's really good. Just
Nope.
immediately dismiss it.
And here, have some quinoa salad.
And
So I
then
told her, I said, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
And then they wonder why having a non-diabetic A1C is so rare. They wonder why they never see it.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Oh my God.
Yeah, I told her, I said, while you were doing this, I put your recipe in my app, and this is what I calculated the carbs to be. And she says, that's a very, very normal amount of carbohydrate for something like this. And I said, but not for me. And I said, I think it's sad that was what was presented to a room full of type 1 diabetics or diabetics in general. And she said, you need carbohydrates. And I said, nope, we don't. I said, I think today I probably had 8, and they all came from broccoli at lunch. And she said, you need carbohydrates. And I said, really? For what? She couldn't answer that. Then the shield went up, and I get it. I get it. Even though you ask questions with a smile and big raised eyebrows, you still can come off as very aggressive. And I get that. I am 6 foot tall and was about half a foot taller than her. So
Imposing.
Yeah. But I told her, I said, I was disappointed. I was disappointed in the presentation. I said, your food looks beautiful. I said, you're obviously well-trained and well-versed in food. I said, but I disagree that you are well-versed in feeding diabetics. And that didn't sit well with her. And that's okay. I wasn't there to, I thought this was going to be big information. I thought we were going to hear new things or see the turning of the tide. And everybody's talking about how the ADA, oh no, the ADA doesn't really. They say everything be a dietable.
Hold on a second.
It is going to take.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
It cut out for a little bit there.
Okay.
Looks like we're good now.
The ADA's okay. It's gonna take a long time for the ADA to change, even if they are in small print on their website. All diets can work. That is not going from the mountaintops. It is not going to be innovation in the endocrinology departments at the Mayo Clinic. It's not. We know that. Number one, because it takes relearning. And let's face it, doctors don't learn about food. We know that. CDEs don't learn about food. We know that.
It's not going to come from the top down, you know?
No, it's not. It's not coming from the top down. You are exactly right. And I stand by my mantra that's carbs are complicated and protein is practical and predictable.
I like that saying.
And it's one of the first things the endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic said to me when I was newly pregnant. And he said, this carb counting thing is new and it's not the exchanges. He says, just remember, carbs are complicated. And I'm like, you are telling me they are. Because that was in the 90s. I was trying to do the grainy, nutty, whole grain breads. I was trying so hard, but an eighth of a piece of bread isn't worth it. It's not worth the electricity to toast it. So don't eat it. Eat something else. Have another piece of bacon. Right.
Dang right. And I mean, as far as diabetes goes, carbohydrates make it complicated.
Absolutely.
So much easier without them.
Right. So I was walking out of the conference and I was immediately surrounded by these 4 people, and they were very curious about the numbers I was telling them I was getting, my daily range, what I eat, how I didn't think that quinoa was something I would enjoy or butternut squash was something I would like to eat. And I got lots of questions. And the gentleman that I was standing there talking to had a huge igloo cooler, not the little one that holds 6 beers, not that one, the big one.
He had a cooler with him?
He had a cooler, whole cooler. He walked in with it. Well, while we were standing there, my low alert at that time of evening, because it was after 9 o'clock now, at that time of night, my low alert is set for 70. And my alarm went off and it was 6, so I was 69. I looked at my watch and I said I was 69, hang on. He says, you're 69? And I said, yes, I am. I said, it's okay. He says, he reached in his cooler and pulled out a Mott's apple juice jar or a bottle and a dark, what was it called? I don't know what it's called. Dark chocolate Milky Way. And he said, do you want one of these? And I said, no, thank you so much. Thank you. You're very sweet, but I don't need that. I said, I've got, and I held up 5 Smarties.
I bet that made him feel weird, huh?
And yeah. And he's like, you need more than that. And I said, no, it's okay. It's okay. He said, you're getting ready to drive home. I said, oh, I'm not driving right now. I said, and I'll be fine. I mean, in a couple minutes, I'll be fine. And if not, in the car, I have more. I have glucose tablets and Smarties in there. He says, Smarties. Oh, I said, well, glucose tablets, Smarties. It's all good. It's not a candy. It's not a treat. It's a treatment. It's not a treat. And his wife is nudging him while I said that. It's a treat, not a treatment. I mean, it's a treatment, not a treat. And she starts nudging him. Well, all of a sudden, it's obvious that she's the one that wants to talk. So she said, this couple, they were in their mid-60s, I would guess. She was retired, he was still working. And they drove their separate cars. So we are now standing behind their car. And she said, you need to take your blood sugar before you get in the car. And he goes, okay. And he shows me his meter and it's 472. And I said, we need, what can we do? He said, oh, I have my insulin. I said, okay, good. He says, I'll take a couple units. And I'm like, a couple units? He says, I just need to get down to 300. I want to go to bed about 300 so I don't drop overnight.
Yo.
And I just kind of brushed that off. And he told me at some point in the evening that his goal, he was diagnosed in 1977. I was diagnosed in 84. He told me that his goal, and I love it when people have goals. Any person, any age should have a goal. And he said, my goal is to be the oldest living type 1 diabetic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so awesome. With a 472 and an A1C in double digits, you are not going to be the oldest living diabetic. And I told him that. And he said, my doctor's not disappointed with my A1C. And I said, it's not him. And this is what the problem is. This is the problem in America, is we all know as type 1 diabetics that we have to be, I hate to say our own physician because obviously we're not physicians, but this is a self-care disease. This is a self-care disease. And too many doctors with God complexes are just tapping people on the head and saying, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Your 8 is fine, your 9 is fine, your 10 is fine. Absolutely, it's all good, because they don't want to work that hard. They don't want to educate, or they don't know, or they're confused. And it's better to run them high than it is to run them, in their opinion, low. Now, I told I told this couple that my limits or my ranges on my Dex, because he had a Dexcom on, or I'm sorry, he had a Libre on. And I told him that my limits or my ranges are 70 to 130. And he said, that's ridiculous. And I didn't do this to show off. I'm not in this. It's not a game. It's not a comparison. It's me versus me. It's yesterday versus today. It's today versus tomorrow.
That's
For
right.
me, it's not Justin versus Susan. It doesn't matter. But I pulled up my app and I said 98% of the time today I've been between those numbers. And she says, well, you must not eat. And I said, actually, I'm a school teacher. And I said, you should see what I ate for lunch. I said, it's my biggest meal of the day. And it was amazing. We have to have dietitians that are willing to talk about this. We have to find them, and we have to put them on pedestals. We have to make rock stars out of the dietitians that are few and far between right now. We have to. And endocrinologists. And I think that the dietitians actually are going to be harder to find than the endocrinologists. That's my opinion. That the last dietitian I saw 2 years ago was a joke. Evidently, we're only allowed to eat 4 eggs a week. Who knew?
Well,
So,
it's complicated with that because I'm sure there's dietitians are more educated away from low carb than endos are, but there's also a lot more dietitians out there than there are endos. Like, they're a
true.
dime a dozen. While endos,
Yeah.
you'd be lucky to get an appointment with them in 6 months in some areas.
You're right. No, you're right. You're right. And in my appointment with my endo, I'm blessed to see the head of endocrinology at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, and she herself is a type 1 diabetic. Love her to death. Love her to death. Total girl crush. And because it's so nice talking to somebody who knows diabetes, who lives it, who sleeps it, who breathes it, who's been pregnant through it, who's been on vacations with it, who's done all of it with it. And while she does not openly endorse what I am doing, she silently smiles and nods and high fives me. And that's also what we're fighting, is the company line and the standards of practice or standards of care of practices. And you're talking about the Mayo Clinic. You know, I probably should be careful where I say that, because obviously it'd be easy to find out who she is. But, you know, we talk about eating eggs for dinner because, let's face it, eggs are easy. Eggs are easy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I do think that endocrinology is becoming a little bit more populated with doctors who get it. And it seems like more and more diabetic endocrinologists are coming up the pipe, which is awesome. I love that. I love that. If I had to do it over again, I was diagnosed my freshman year in college. If I had to do it over again, I would definitely go into nursing so I could be a CDE, or I don't know if I have it cut out to be a doctor, but I would do something so that I could be in the medical field helping. But I didn't have that foresight when I was 35 years ago.
Well, the problem is with a lot of these doctors, the neuro ones are, more open-minded, but not just that, but it's hard to figure out, it's hard to learn about this stuff.
Right.
I thought, I used to think, hey, it would have been great to be a endocrinologist myself, but now I realize if that's what I was trying to get into, I would have never had time to learn about any of this. And I would have been doing exactly what everyone else is doing. And so I really can't blame them for that, because the information just isn't available to them. And I mean, we need to get to a point where endos not only support it, not only recommend it, but actually know what to do about it. Because right now, I feel like one reason a lot of endos are scared of low carb is because they just don't know what to do with it.
They don't know.
It's different techniques, and they don't know them. So if they don't know them, how are they supposed to help someone that's low carb?
Right. When somebody asks about dosing for protein, they're like, "What?
Our insulin? You still use that?"
Right. They don't even know that it's still available. So no, but what this evening I spent on Tuesday night, it was, I was so bothered. I didn't sleep. I was so upset that this woman had just given all of this information. I promise you, all these senior citizens in this room are going to be freezing bread. Oh, same thing. If you refrigerate potatoes and rice, it's way safer to eat.
What?
So they're supposed to make their mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving the day before and reheat their mashed potatoes.
That just makes no sense at all. Like, I've heard of fermenting your grains and stuff like that, sprouting. I've heard stuff like that, but
No.
just the fridge.
Freezer, freeze it.
Oh
Your
my god.
refrigerator your potatoes, freeze your bread. Once it's cooled, the ultra resistant starch, resistant starch. Add fiber, reduce calories, whatever you can do to reduce calories and add fiber. Nothing about healthy fats, nothing about avocados, nothing about oils, nothing about nuts. Nuts, ooh, high calorie, don't eat too many nuts. High
Nothing about
calorie.
meat. Not a single animal food mentioned.
Nope. Well, the funny thing was, she's like, everybody's talking about turkey, of course, because we're gonna be cooking in the next couple of weeks. And I'm like, ooh, I don't eat turkey. And they're like, you don't? I'm like, oh, super hard to dose for. Tryptophan, man. It's a bear.
All that protein and no fat, it's just tough for me. It's gonna be
like,
Thanksgiving's not gonna be easy, and I'm not even gonna cheat. It's still not gonna be easy for me.
just go with the ribeye. Just go the ribeye route. That's our big joke. There's the ribeye route.
When I host Thanksgiving, it's just gonna be a big old like rib roast or something like that. Not gonna be turkey. So bland.
Brisket. Ooh, brisket. Yum.
Brisket. Exactly.
Fatty.
It's gonna be the most popular Thanksgiving ever. They're gonna want to go to my house every year from then on. But
so now that I've had this evening, and I'm so disappointed with the hospital and the Center for Diabetes Management, and I am on a mission. I'm on a mission here in Arizona to find a dietitian and a CDE that they don't even have to endorse it and encourage it. They have to just acknowledge. I just want somebody to acknowledge that diabetics are carbohydrate intolerant, and that the lower carb, the better, and that carbohydrates are not necessary for the human diet. I just want one of these people, because seriously, I think with the community I'm involved in, that you're involved in, we could make them rock stars. We could just find them.
I can give you a couple of resources for that. There's I have a list on my website, but it's not really comprehensive yet. But there's other sites like a lot of low carb, like big low carb websites that, like Diet Doctor, for example, that have a whole list of experts and dietitians and doctors that advocate for low carb. So if you want, I can send it to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Because I'd love to find one here in Arizona. I just would like to have somebody pat me on the back and say, "You're doing it right, Suze. You're doing it right."
All I want is some support, man. It's gonna be that hard.
It is, and it's. I mean, obviously, my husband supports me 110%. My kiddos support me. My granddaughter, they all eat just like I do, and my friends, most of them think I'm crazy, and that's I am. But it comes down to that statement I got in 1990: carbs are complicated. Carbs are complicated. Now, I added the protein is practical and predictable years later, but carbs are complicated. They just are. Carb counting does not work. It is a myth, because you know that 22 grams of Frosted Flakes cereal that's listed as a third of a cup, it doesn't work. It does not work. And 2 tablespoons of peanut butter that's supposed to have 8 grams of carbohydrate is way more or way less. Which one? We don't know. Carbs are complicated. They just are.
You could add to that, if you want all 3 macros, you could do carbs are complicated, protein's practical, and fat is friendly.
Fat is very friendly. Very friendly. Friday friendly. Hey, Friday friendly. There you go.
We're recording this on Friday.
Tuesday, instead of Taco Tuesday, let's do Fat Friday.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? But I wanted to ask. I was curious about a few things you said, but you didn't. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but what's your A1C when that lady asked about it?
Oh, just 4.9. And 4.9. I pulled up my app and I showed her.
That's so amazing. She probably wouldn't have believed you if you just told her that. And what was? Did you get asked the A1C of that one guy you talked to?
He said double digits.
Oof. See, when you're so not proud of your A1C that you just say double digits, you you can't then say, oh, the doctor's fine with it. Well, clearly you're not even fine with it if you don't even want to admit it.
You don't even want to tell me. Yeah. So I was being kind, and I assumed he meant 10 something when he said double digits.
Probably more.
Well, it probably was, because of Mott's apple juice and Milky Way bars. But 472. I will never forget that, in the dark parking garage. His wife scanned the Libre and she said, "You need to test your blood before you drive." And he's 472. I will never forget. I'm like, I would feel like death.
Oh yeah.
And I have cotton mouth, and I'd be sucking down the water, and I sure as hell would not want to be behind the wheel. And he was getting ready to drive his truck all the way across Arizona, or all the way across the valley to go home. And I'm like, and people are worried about me driving with an 85. Really? Because
it's so crazy, man.
Yeah. So you and I are few and far between, but we're growing in numbers, Justin. I believe it. We're growing in numbers faster than I thought possible. And I've been doing this for a long time. And it's so refreshing nowadays to see that there are groups and there are friends that you can find. And we're having a meetup Friendsgiving here in Arizona in a couple weeks. And it's so refreshing. And I think that in the next decade, we will see, there's the gluten-free aisle at the grocery store. I think that we will begin to see more and more carb-free options. At least I'm hoping so.
I mean, they already have Ribble ice cream in Kroger's all over the United States, which is pretty nice.
True.
So it's happening.
True.
And
I liked it. Ooh, I don't like it.
I like it. I like it. It's popular enough that almost half the time I go there, they're sold out. So.
Well, and see, I'm just an avoider. I'm an avoider. Like, you know what? I have a hard time even eating Lily's chocolate. I'm like, it's just I don't need it.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I want to ask. So, just sum it up. She talked about fiber. She talked about really bad about fat, of course, and talked bad about butter. But praised canola oil, which by the way is a terrible fat. Let's see, it's terrible for you. Terrible. I'm going to make a video about this soon. And all this other stuff. Was there any other misinformation she gave that you might not have mentioned?
Those were the biggest. I mean, just that fruits. I mean, you got to get fruits in your diet.
Oh, it's different.
You got to have all those micronutrients. You got to have fruits.
Natural sugar. Natural.
Absolutely. I think it was her or the CDE that said one of the biggest nutrients that your micronutrients people miss is B12, and it's in bread. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's added to bread. It's not a naturally occurring part of bread.
It's a supplement. I mean, there hasn't been even a lot of studies done with these supplements to see if they actually work. Like, sometimes it will improve your blood levels. But, I mean, if supplements worked, then vegans wouldn't be starving themselves and having to leave after a few years, you know?
Right.
But it is what it is.
So, yeah. So I have 2 beautifully printed off recipes for ridiculously high recipes that I'll never. Like I said, she was a lovely human being, and she obviously is very passionate about food, but I would say she is woefully uneducated about feeding diabetics. At least this diabetic.
You gotta be proper to wording. She's educated, but that's a problem. She's miseducated. She's misinformed.
Miseducated. There you go.
You know?
Yes.
Because to say she's uneducated would imply that she never went to school or anything. She did.
You're right.
But that's the issue. The school's telling her the wrong things. And this is what we're fighting against, guys. This is the battle that we're in right now, where you have
we're fighting the establishment. Yep.
You have the establishment telling all the experts, all people we're supposed to trust, lies, essentially, not based on anything. And we have to puddle around and find these Facebook groups in order to find the truth. And then we get to be those annoying patients that go up to a doctor and say, "Hey, Google told me you're wrong." You know?
Yes.
They don't like to hear it, but that is what it is.
It is what it is. And like I said, we're growing in numbers. I think that there is going to be a tide turn in the next decade. I think it's going to
Absolutely.
take a long time, and it's going to take some, and I hate to say this, I hate it, but I think you would agree with me. It's going to take some very big name people, some movie stars, some superstar athletes, some people in the public eye to have diabetes and switch their way of eating and find success and then share it. That's
Man,
what, yeah.
if Nick Jonas became a low carb Dr. Bernstein advocate, that'd be huge.
Yeah. And the thing that's so funny is, let's see, he probably has a chef and he doesn't even know if he's eating carbs or not, right?
But that's okay. Whether celebrities endorse it or not, we'll still keep going. We'll still keep Tam Type 1. And the people who are lucky enough to find this information, to find this amazing rant video that I've had a joy making with you, they're going to find the way. They're going to figure it out, and more will.
You know? All right, Justin, thank
Truth
you
will
for
prevail, man. Yes. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Susan.
Bet, Justin. Thanks for letting me vent, and I'm going to go wake up my granddaughter now. All right?
All right. You have a good night.
Okay, bye-bye.